What's your favorite? Wow, I didn't see that one coming, from a relative/friend. My sister, much older and not living with us at the time, had a cat that had kittens. They were ready to go to new homes around the same time that my dad died. Me being 12 and sad really wanted to keep my favorite one, the runt of the litter. She let me have the kitten, but we both agreed to hide it from my mom as long as possible. My mom absolutely despised cats. So much so, that when my sister was younger and would bring them home, she would conveniently leave the door open so they'd run away or straight up bring them to the shelter. She vehemently refused to ever allow a cat in her house. So, I got away with hiding my kitty for about a week. I was a chronic after-school napper, and was knocked out when she came to check in on me randomly. The kitten peeked out from under the bed and she literally screamed because she thought it was a rat at first, lol. She was pissed. She went to her room with the kitten and probably called my sister to come take it home. Surprisingly, when I went to her room like an hour later, they were just cuddling and watching TV. She did let me keep it, I assume because I was grieving at the time. But she really did enjoy that cat. Eventually when I moved out, and she moved houses, she took the cat with her. A few years after my kitty had passed away, she went out and got a new kitten all on her own accord. Like, literally without telling me. I went to visit and was like, whose cat is that? And she just goes, oh, that's mine. His name is Squash. I never saw that coming. She still says she hates cats to this day, but she likes her cats. She's actually considering getting 2 more soon so Squash has some friends. My uncle was a bank robber. He never seemed like he cared if he had money. But he got addicted to drugs and then went on a spree. Saw his grainy image on TV news from the CCTV and an eyewitness sketch, and I was just like, hey, that's Uncle Dave. That's weird. Just this past weekend. My parents, both 63 years old, were in town. They live about 5 hours away. They, my brother, and his girlfriend, who is basically another sibling at this point, all came over for brunch. After we ate, my parents sat us down and said they had some very important news they needed to tell us about my dad. They built it up a lot saying this is a big deal for them and that they kept going back and forth about how to tell us and when would be the best time, but that they knew they had to tell us soon because it's a major deal for my dad. I 100% thought they were about to tell us that a doctor had told my dad he had 6 months to live or something. Nope. My dad, who is retired, got an offer to go back to work full-time as a consultant for 1 year. That was the news. He's going back to work for a year. I see them, maybe, 5 times a year, mostly on holidays. This will not impact my relationship or experiences with my parents in the slightest, but they framed it as a huge piece of bad news they had to tell us. My very conservative grandmother reluctantly trying medicinal marijuana for her many ailments, having it work and now questioning many of her other beliefs. Not sure if it's a case of, well, if I was wrong about this, or if being finally relieved of decades of pain makes her more open-minded/agreeable. Either way, it's great. Once, I brought a kitten from the shelter to my parents. At first, Dad was vehemently against it, saying he didn't like cats. But in a very short time, less than a week, when I visited, Dad told me that the kitten is the best thing that happened to him. Aside from the wedding, of course. Now, I constantly remind him of how he didn't want to take Snape. Former coworker went on a bank robbing spree. Like, she wasn't a very nice person and I was happy when she left that workplace. But I definitely did not have bank robber vibes, I just thought she was a garden variety biatch. My uncle has always been a bigot and not too fond of women. He's gotten much worse to my older sister now that her and her wife are expecting. It blew up last Easter when he started preaching about people choosing who they want rather than who they should. He practically said that if a man wasn't supposed to be with a woman, every man would choose another man. There's no way any man in his right mind would choose to be with a woman if he didn't have to. After some pointed staring he clammed up and refused to elaborate. Suddenly the 4 failed marriages and no children made more sense, though. Neighbor for over 15 years, tells me he's getting divorced, they were waiting for the kids to move out and be on their own. Within a few months he's having house parties and living it up, next thing we see is he has a guy friend move in. Now they're a couple. Total shock, never suspected nor thought for a minute he was gay. Great neighbor though. I should have seen it coming, but I didn't. My sister gambled away around $500,000 of our mom's, actually our granddad's, money, leaving practically nothing. This is still very fresh. My mom refused to press charges and instead doubled down and went back to live with her and gave her more money. My other sister and I have been alienated because of this. My mom then passed away on April 22nd. I am not speaking to my sister, who is listed as the executor of the will. I'm sure that is the end of any inheritance I would have gotten, and I hope she has fun dealing with the legal and tax ramifications of what she did. I've posted about this on a couple of other threads today, but but I'm the one who threw a curveball to my now boyfriend. We know each other through work, and through a few mutual friends. One of those mutual friends is my roommate, who's a gay woman. Dude and I would have regular lunch together at work, and all that time he thought that I was my roommate's girlfriend since we lived together. That changed one night last December when all of us went out to a social event after work, and roommate's actual girlfriend showed up. That's how he learned I was straight. By the next week we were officially dating. When my dad admitted to spending my and my sister's portion of our mom's life insurance policy, $25,000 each, on a brand new truck. When I say our portion, I mean it was in our own secure savings account that only he had access to, and we were set to receive access when we turned 21. He did this when we were 9 and 11, only months after our mom passed. Likely when he received his portion, $50,000, which was spent on renovating the house, only to sell it. My dad robbed a Blockbuster that he worked at when I was like 10 and didn't tell any of us. One day I called the store to talk to him to see if he could bring me home Spyro for PlayStation, and the manager asked to talk to my ma. He then proceeded to tell us that my dad robbed the store a couple of days prior and was arrested. He kept coming and leaving the house as if he was still going to work all those days. Needless to say, the divorce happened shortly after. My great-grandfather and his 2 brothers went to prison, and not college, for 4 years for robbing trains. They had sold the family dairy farm just a couple years before the Great Depression and started a general store. They were all late teens/early 20s with multiple kids each already. But during the Depression, Kraft Cheese started sending super cheap fake cheese and other dairy products into the area, undercutting all the local dairies. My grandpa and his brothers realized that they still depended on the local dairy industry as customers, so they robbed the trains of all the Kraft cheese and threw it into fields to rot. A reporter from Chicago was on one of the trains and got a picture of their faces, and they all went to college for a few years. The local law just couldn't seem to catch the bandits that were trying to save the town economy. When I graduated college, my grandmother said I was the first in the family. I asked what about great-grandpa, and she said, oh no, he went to prison, not college. But no one else in the family ever knew either, lol. When they got out, they were all voted in as town councilmen, literally had customers for life. My great-grandmother ran the store while they were in prison, and she went on to run it until she retired at 93 years old. Great-grandpa had died in his 60s. When they got out, they were all voted in as town councilmen, literally had customers for life. My great-grandmother ran the store while they were in prison, and she went on to run it until she retired at 93 years old. Great-grandpa had died in his 60s. Not a friend but an athlete from another school. He came out of nowhere sophomore year and dominated XC/track for the next 3 years. He also was a top-tier student and got a scholarship to a good D1 school. Found out a few years later he died of a heroin OD and had a problem for a while. On the phone with my mom, so your cousin P just got out of rehab for alcohol and cocaine use, did you know he and your cousin B are in a romantic relationship? P and B are my first cousins, but they are also first cousins. No, I did not know. Yes, I still pretend that I do not know when I see them. Years ago, maybe 8 or 9 now, my mom got a call from either her mom or her great-aunt asking if she'd heard about her great-uncle. Turns out he was growing weed in his condo, got caught, and fled to Costa Rica. He ended up coming back and serving something like a year in prison. I came out as trans and my 88-year-old grandparents were actually the most supportive and understanding out of anyone. My grandmother's boyfriend, who grew up in a conservative Catholic family, said to me, you know, I'm not always the most masculine man myself. I'm not going to judge you for doing what makes you happy. When I was in high school, there was a guy, Mike, in nearly all of my classes. He was nice enough but very, very dorky. He was tall and thin, average-looking, but really a doofus. He had a huge crush on me through high school and even asked me out a couple of times. I told him no, nicely, but we remained friendly because we had a mutual friend. Once he knew I really and truly wasn't interested, Mike chased after one girl or another and was always crushing on some girl. Finally, senior year, Mike did date this girl for a bit, but things fizzled once they both went off to college. Well, I caught up with Mike about 20 years after graduation. After college, he moved to the opposite coast and no one heard from him for a while. He ended up moving back home due to some family issues, and when we met up I was greeted with a very, very openly homosexual man. He looked fantastic, he was in amazing shape, well-groomed and well-dressed. Honestly, I barely even recognized him. He looked like a different person. He'd been in a committed relationship with another man for over a decade, was super happy and living his best life. Couldn't be happier for him, but man, you could have knocked me over with a feather. Have, or maybe had at this point, an uncle that was relatively respected by people that knew him. Active in church, teacher, outgoing with a sense of humor. Spent my entire childhood slowly redoing his house, living in the same one the whole time. Met a homeless person at a church fundraiser/food drive/community event or whatever. Let's then stay in the garage because it was dead winter in a Midwest state. Fast forward 5 years from that decision, dude's meatied out of his mind, sprinkling flour outside trying to catch footprints and punching holes in his walls because people are living in there. 25 plus years of hard work done with his own hands undone by those same hands. Cops know him by name but he's never done anything arrest-worthy, I guess? Lost his family, will never see his grandkids, I'm just assuming death here before he'd ever get clean, drove one of his sons to multiple failed suicide attempts and hospital stays. Wildest thing I think we've heard from him was he got wild babbling about the cartels and we just wrote it off as crazy person talk fueled by a meth-addled brain, but sure enough a news story a week and a half later was about arrest made in connection with a Mexican cartel member. Quite an interesting way to spend your 60s, I guess.